Right guys, I've done just a quick video today, or it might actually be a bit of a longer video. I have finally, after years of wanting to and not pulling the trigger, finally pulled the trigger and received delivery of the ATX pin stack multi-press gym. Was a bit worried that it wouldn't fit, but as you can see, it has gone into the gym. I'm going to flip the camera around and that way I'll just talk over a bunch of B-roll of me going through the exercises, but I will talk a little bit about the machine and then probably the weaknesses of the instruction manual and the strength of the machine's design, which actually compensated for me almost breaking this thing when I assembled it. So hopefully you've seen the hyperlapse of the unboxing. That's about how much plastic I've got left. I do want to point out before I put it together, because I think it's worth noting, Sam did a couple of walkthroughs at the warehouse, but one thing I'd like to add, which I wasn't sure about, is you cannot understate the little touches, and it doesn't come through to the video. So Sam spoke about the knurling, which I suspected the knurling was fine, but I figured that the paint or the powder coat would fill up the knurling gaps, but it really hasn't. So that, I don't know if you can get the impression of that through video, but that knurling feels almost exactly as grippy, despite having the powder coat on it, as the knurling on the lat pull down bar feels, which is obviously chromed, but you very rarely, or at least in my experience, most knurled and powder coated components from other suppliers, the paint tends to fill up the knurling and it makes the knurling not very good, not very grippy. So that's an awesome little touch about the grip. Another thing that I would like to note, which will pay off in the assembly process, is that ATX has, as much as they can, had a lot of the bolts, bearings and wheels on the moving mechanisms pre-rigged almost, with nice foam spaces, so you keep them apart, stop them scratching in transit, and also makes my job a lot easier because I don't have as many nuts and bolts to locate around the moving mechanisms. So that's something that's really good, really nice to see, and I'm sure it'll pay off when I come to put the thing together. standard that the machine is built to, all well and good. The issue that I had, could very well just be a me issue, tooling, no tools were supplied. It's absolutely fine for me. I've got a shitload of tools, so that wasn't a problem. Some people would like to think that maybe they could throw in a set of Allen keys and a single spanner, considering it's a Australian price around about $4,500, I think, with delivery, or 4,200, something like that. But no complaints from my perspective. Just if you don't have tools, you will need to get these yourself. And then in terms of the instructions, everything arrived, but the issue I had is that all of the nuts and bolts, and keep in mind this is just an exploded view, the majority of the machine was pre-assembled, all the moving mechanisms were pre-assembled. The issue is that, as you can see here, all of the parts that you needed to use were numbered, which is fine. And then you have numbers here, which is fine. But the issue is that all of the parts arrived in 3 separate bags with cardboard backing with 0 numbers whatsoever. It was just a big mess of parts. So I had to guesstimate with a lot of the bits, and I definitely did screw up a couple of pieces. So now this is the bit that, this is entirely my fault that I have screwed up, but the bearings that are inside these arms, right, well, you can't really see from the photo there, but inside those sleeves are 2 machine bearings, one on the outside, one on the inside, on both arms. The picture didn't give me any indication that I could pick up, at least, that you needed to, it led me to believe that you could just slide the bearings arm on, which I could not. And so where I've damaged the machine, I'll show you now. So here is where the bearings go on, and the bearings are under this washer here. Now this big washer, for example, I didn't know that that washer is actually not to cover the bearing. It actually is supposed to go here on this squat pipe, and I have absolutely no desire to use the squat pipe. And in the end, I needed to keep these on here because these bearings, and you see here where I've screwed up. So first of all, the bearings aren't suited for this bolt. They were almost suited for this bolt, but I couldn't work out where else they went. So I drilled them out a little bit so they'd slide over the bolt. That was fine. But the bearings themselves under here, which you can sort of see inside there. Now I've worked with a number of bearing machines in the past, and I've got some more out here. So there are some bearings here underneath this washer. Now the bearings, these are a similar bearing, but they're not the same. But generally a bearing should just comfortably slide, and there are bearings in there as well. They should just comfortably slide over the shaft of what they are supposed to sleeve onto. Now these bearings, I couldn't get it to just slide on nicely, so I smashed the shaft and the inside of the bearing with a lot of WD-40. This one I was eventually able to jiggle on. This one here, and again this is probably a me problem, but I could not for the life of me get this to slide on as one piece. And so I got, it kind of got jammed, almost like the very end of this shaft that it's on, similar to this, was, and you couldn't see it, it didn't look that way, but there was a lot of friction right here at this point. And so I grabbed a rubber mallet for the other one, and I gave it a few taps, and then the other one slid on. This is after lubricating it with a lot of WD-40. And so that one went on. This one, I got frustrated. I was tapping it, and nothing happened. Ended up switching to a steel hammer, tapping it, just trying to get it to fit over the end. And in the course of doing it, I got the first bearing on, and once it got past that first centimetre, it slid on nicely. The second bearing wouldn't go on, so I tapped it, and two things happened. One was that I actually broke the inside of the bearing. The inside ring actually popped out with the ball bearings. Was able after much persuading again with the rubber mallet to get the bearing to go back together, and then insert the bearing in. And then you can almost see here, because I kept tapping around here with the rubber mallet and then eventually with the steel hammer to get this to go on, occasionally I would accidentally hit the bolt here, which is part of the shaft. Like it's got a threaded end that comes out the end right here, and I damaged the thread to the point where this nut wouldn't thread on anymore because the end was so burred, and I stupidly persisted with the wrench, and instead of it getting onto the thread, there is still some thread under there, which you can see, and so that part of the thread is nice, but that's as far as I can. And I'm using a tension wrench to get that on, and it will not go on any further. I've cross-threaded the crap out of that, and potentially not ruined it, but slightly compromised the function, because you can see here, when you put them on properly, right, I can lift this up, and there is no side-to-side play, or like 1 millimetre of side-to-side play. That's me deliberately trying to jiggle it left and right. The other one, and again, don't think this is a knock on ATX quality, because I damaged this. This was my fault. Now you can see it's got a little bit of left and right movement there. Right. Now, thankfully, I can fix this. I'll be hitting up the boys at Sam's for my idiocy and seeing if they can get me the part number of that inside bearing, because there is a bearing shop just up the road from me in the industrial area, so I can get a new bearing here. I'm going to have to cut that off with a grinder, but thankfully, like I said, if I take this washer out, which was never supposed to be there in the first place, there is enough thread on there that I'll be able to get another nut on once I cut off this burred, flogged out section, and that will fix it. But that's my fault. That's not a reflection on ATX. I just wanted to note though, the tolerances on these things are a curse when I put it together, but it's a blessing when you use it, because you'll see in the B-roll, and I'll probably talk about it, but even though there is, sorry, get that safety out of the way, even though there is the slightest bit of movement when I deliberately jiggle this left and right now, right, and remember there's no movement in the other side, but this bit of sideways left and right movement that I can do right then deliberately, I do not feel that happening whatsoever in practice when I actually use the machine as intended for straight up and down pressing and pulling. So the good news is, still works perfectly. Bad news is I'm an idiot, and that was a bitch to put together. Maybe improve the instructions a little bit. I don't think I'm totally not handy. Anyone that's been following the videos in the Garage Gyms Australia forum knows that I am a tinkerer, and I'm more often than not successful. I've done modifications to make my belt squat fit inside the rack, and I've rebuilt and retwigged, you know, put chest support pads on chest machines and a bunch of other stuff around the place. I totally fixed this to work perfectly, and it had all this damage inside. So I'm not altogether hopeless, but yeah, this is one in particular that I went dangerously close to wrecking the machine. But other than that, as I said, I'll take 99% of the blame there, but it is a phenomenal machine, and the build quality, which I'll talk about during the voiceover, is amazing. So what are my final thoughts, guys? As I just chuck in a couple of little bonus exercise here that I thought of while hacking with the machine. Look, the machine's brilliant. The errors were made in the reading of the instructions, so that's my fault. As far as the motion, it's absolutely amazing. Really, really happy with the build quality. The welds are all machine welds. It's absolutely true and straight and strong. The 1-to-1 ratio through the bearings is really good. The ergonomics of the machine are fantastic, and the best part is that the seat of this particular bench actually aligns really well with the jammer arms to make them feel really good for all hammer strength style presses and pulls, leverage exercises. So really, really happy with the purchase. Don't shy away from giving Sam and the boys a call to see if you can get one for yourself, because as far as an upper body focused multi-gym machine goes, this is probably the best I have ever used. Cheers.